The Senate is about to gavel in for the day. Members today will work on a bill that would set a minimum effective tax rate for people with higher incomes. It would require that taxpayers with more than $2 million in income pay a minimum of 30% in federal taxes. Live coverage of the Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, the Prince of Peace, give our senators this day the grace to move away from divisions. Take from them all cynicism and resentment and anything else that may hinder them from experiencing harmony. May the bonds of patriotism, truth, peace, faith, and love provide the glue that will enable them to glorify you with their oneness. Graft in their hearts the love of your name as you nourish them with all goodness and mercy. May they find in you a faithful guide. We pray in your great name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., March 28, 2012. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair, signed Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, if any, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to 2230. That's the Paying a Fair Share Act. The Republicans will control the first 30 minutes. The majority will control the next 30 minutes. I now ask unanimous consent that following the first hour, the time until 5 p.m. today be equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or the designees, that the time from 2 to 3 be under the control of the majority, the time from 3 to 4 under the control of the Republicans.
No objection.
Thanks, Madam President. At 5 tonight, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the DUE, that's BU, and Morgan nominations. Prospective judges from Nevada and Louisiana. At 6 p.m., there will be 2 votes on confirmation of those nominations. There are 3 bills at the desk due for a second reading.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills en bloc the second time.
H.R. 2682, an act to provide end-user exemptions for certain provisions of the Commodity Exchange Act and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and for other purposes. H.R. 2779, an act to exempt inter-affiliate swaps from certain regulatory requirements put in place by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. H.R. 4014, an act to amend the Federal Deposit Insurance Act, and so forth.
I, Madam President, object to H.R. 4014, 2779, and 2682. For any further action at this time?
Objections having been heard, the bills will now be placed on the calendar.
Madam President, today the Senate will consider the nomination of a woman by the name of Miranda Dew to be a United States District Judge, the District Court of Nevada. I was very pleased to recommend this woman because she's such an experienced litigator and a very proud Nevadan. Ms. Dew has an enormous love for the state and this country and a tremendous dedication to public service. Her story is about as inspiring as it gets, Madam President, and it proves without any question the American dream is alive and well. Nevada's Asian Pacific population is less than 10%. But if confirmed, Ms. Dew will be the first Asian American federal judge in the history of the state of Nevada. Miranda Dew left Vietnam when she was 8 years old with her family in a boat. She was one of the boat people. She was born in Vietnam. She and her family survived the war, and they left. They left voluntarily because they couldn't get out any other way. I said she left voluntarily. They sneaked out and got a boat and took off. Where they wound up was in Malaysia. She spent more than 2 years in a refugee camp in Malaysia, this little girl. She was then, with her family, taken to Alabama. Vietnam, Malaysia, Alabama. When she got there, she enrolled in an American school for the first time. She didn't know how to speak English, and that's an understatement. But as a third grader, everyone recognized how smart she was. She picked up the language very quickly. Miranda Dew speaks, it doesn't matter if she had an accent, but she has none. Today she speaks as well as you or I. Her family, after living in Alabama, where her father worked on a dairy farm, they eventually worked their way into California. She continued to be pointed out as always one of the smartest in any class. She was able to go to college. She got a degree in history and economics from the University of California at Davis, and her law degree from one of the finest law schools in the world, University of California at Berkeley, Bolt Hall, famous Bolt Hall. She did well wherever she went to school. After law school, she moved to Nevada. She joined at that time a law firm, McDonald, Carano, and Wilson, which, Madam President, is a very, very respected law firm. Bob McDonald, the founder of that firm, was a protege of the famous Nevada Senator Pat McCarran, and he was involved in politics. He was a very prominent lawyer until he died a couple years ago. Don Carano, also a very well-known, famous man in Nevada. He's done extremely well, a lawyer, owns major hotels and casinos. He's one of the biggest producers of wine in the state of California. And Mike Wilson was a long-time Nevada State Senator. Just a very fine group of people, these three men that started this law firm. She was made a partner in 2002 of the law firm. Her specialty is litigation. She's a trial lawyer, and a very good one. She specializes in complex civil litigation and also employment law. And she's appeared before the state and federal courts in all phases of litigation. Trial lawyer, appellate lawyer before the Nevada Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. She has the support of a bipartisan coalition of Nevada officials, including the governor. By the way, the governor was one of my appointments to the federal bench. He was a federal judge, Brian Sandoval, and a good federal judge. He resigned that position and ran for governor against my son, and he won. He's a fine man. He's my friend, and he has come out vocally and very publicly that this woman is a great lawyer and should be on the bench, something he should know a little bit about. She has received vocal support from the Lieutenant Governor, also a Republican, the Mayor of Reno, also a Republican. In fact, Governor Sandoval wrote to the Judiciary Committee to say, quote, "DEW has exhibited great character and is well respected in the legal community," close quote. He has given her his unqualified support. Republican Governor, Lieutenant Governor Brian Krolecki called Ms. DEW, quote, "intelligent, inquisitive, reliable, and dedicated," end of quote. And the Republican Mayor of Reno, who, by the way, we had a visit here yesterday, Bob Cashel, said DEW, quote, "will be a great addition to the bench." In addition to being an experienced litigator, she's also an outstanding citizen. She's involved in the Northern Nevada community. Many things she's done, but she serves on the Nevada Commission on Economic Development. She's also served as a court-appointed special advocate representing abused and neglected children. She now and has in the past, over a number of years, mentored high school students in Reno, Nevada. She's a fine example to those students. Madam President, I've had the good fortune to be able to forward to presidents about 10 names, and I've never been more proud of one than Miranda DEW. I repeat, if there were ever a success story, it's this woman who was born in Vietnam, took a boat and wound up in Malaysia, came from Malaysia to America, to Alabama, to California, and is now one of the most respected lawyers we have in the state of Nevada. This is what America's all about.
Mr. President, will the senator from Nevada yield just for a comment? Sure. Could I say I thank him for honoring those who came to this country, who fled re-education camps, execution, and the most horrible, brutal regime period, and the enormous contribution that those individuals and their children now have made to our nation, our economy, our political scene is remarkable, and one that all of us should be extremely proud of. I thank the senator from Nevada for recognizing those individuals' contribution.
Madam President, and this coming from a person who was held for 7 years in a prisoner of war camp in that country. I think anyone hearing this, and there's lots of people watching this, should understand what John McCain just said. John McCain and I have battled on a number of substantive issues over the years, but I don't think there's any two people have, at least I speak from my perspective, that I have more admiration and respect for than John McCain, who has done so much for his country.
I thank the leader for his generous and kind remarks, and as he said, he and I have done battle on the honorable field of combat, but I think the feeling of respect and appreciation and admiration is mutual. I thank the leader.
Madam President.
Republican leader.
If I may just add, the colloquy between the majority leader and my good friend from Arizona certainly underscores once again the extraordinary contribution that legal immigration has made to our country for over 200 years. I think, as an example, my own wife, who came here at age 8 not speaking a word of English, and Majority Leader was just pointing out an immigrant from Vietnam who's done well. Senator McCain said the same thing that all three of us said on numerous occasions, so it is indeed something to celebrate. And Madam President, yesterday afternoon I came to the floor to suggest that what's been happening in the Senate this week is precisely the kind of thing the American people really don't like about Washington. Gas prices have more than doubled under President Obama and the Democratic-controlled Senate. This is a problem that affects every single American. It drives up the cost of everything from commuting to groceries. And yet the Democratic response is to propose legislation that even they admit doesn't do a thing to lower the price of gas. We've got 7 Democrats, in fact, on record saying the bill doesn't do a thing to lower gas prices. One of them has called it laughable.
But this is apparently the best our friends on the other side can do. It's the most apparently they're willing to do. At a time when gas prices are at a national average of nearly $4 a gallon, this is what passes for a response to high gas prices for Washington Democrats, a bill that simply does nothing about it. But it even gets worse than that, because not only is the Democratic solution to high gas prices a bill that even they admit does nothing to lower gas prices, they won't even allow Republicans to offer any amendments that would help. Not only are they pushing a bill that won't lower gas prices, they're blocking any measure that would actually make a difference. So at a moment when working Americans are struggling with high gas prices, the message Democrats in Washington are sending this week is simple. Get used to it. Get used to it. Because they've got nothing but a phony proposal aimed at distracting people from the fact that they have nothing to offer. Maybe the reason they voted yesterday to get off their own bill is that they realized the American people were on to them. Maybe they realized they didn't have the political issue they thought they did. Well, my point is that they should be more concerned about helping Americans than helping their own campaigns. So if Democrats won't allow us to offer any proposals to address this crisis, we're still going to talk about them anyway, because Americans need to know that there are some things we could do about this issue. We could actually have an impact on high gas prices right here in Congress. They need to hear us debate these ideas, and they need to know that Democratic leaders in the Senate won't even allow a vote on any of these ideas. This whole episode is completely and totally unacceptable. And hopefully at some point, a number of Democrats will recognize this, will recognize that this should be more about just political games. We ought to actually try to accomplish something. This issue affects real people. For them, it's an urgent matter. And Democrats should summon the same urgency in dealing with it. We were sent here to solve problems, not to hide from them. Now, Madam President, on an entirely different matter, something very special in the world of sports is happening in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Kentucky is well known as the home of the Kentucky Derby, often called the greatest 2 minutes in sports. But this coming Saturday, March the 31st, we will witness one of the greatest moments in Kentucky sports history. Two of the most storied and winningest programs in all of college basketball, the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky, will meet this Saturday in the 2012 NCAA Tournament Final Four. The two teams will face off in the semifinal game in New Orleans, and the winner of that game will contest for the national championship next Monday night. Now, in my home state of Kentucky, the rivalry between fans of U of L and UK is indeed passionate. From birth, it seems, Kentuckians are raised to root for one of these two teams. You either wear red for the Cardinals or blue for the Wildcats. The two teams boast two legendary coaches, Rick Pitino and John Calipari. The teams have met every year since 1983, and they've met in the NCAA tournament 4 times in the past, most recently in the Mid-East Regionals way back in 1984. Between them, they have 24 visits to the Final Four, but never have these two teams faced each other in the Final Four with the stakes so high. If the excitement and frenzy and turbulence that's been stirred up in Kentucky this week could be harnessed, we could solve our energy crisis. Basketball fans from Kentucky have been waiting their whole lives for this game. And on Saturday, we will prove that these two schools have the best rivalry in all of college basketball, and that the Commonwealth of Kentucky is the best college basketball state in the nation. Let me say that again, so my friends in North Carolina can hear it. U of L and UK have the best rivalry in all of college basketball, and the Commonwealth of Kentucky is the best college basketball state in the nation. But only one team can win on Saturday. I'm actually an alumnus of both schools. I attended the University of Louisville as an undergraduate and went to law school at the University of Kentucky. So I don't know who will win Saturday's game, but I do know this. Whoever the winner is will go on to defeat either Kansas or Ohio State and bring the national championship back home to Kentucky where it belongs. So count me in with my fellow Kentuckians and college basketball fans everywhere as we tune in this Saturday to see history in the making. Madam President, it's going to be really exciting to watch. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S-2230, which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 339 S-2230, a bill to reduce the deficit by imposing a minimum effective tax rate for high-income taxpayers.
Under the previous order, the time until 5 p.m. will be equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first 30 minutes and the majority controlling the second 30 minutes, and with the majority controlling the time from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. and the time from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. being controlled by the Republicans.
Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to engage in a colloquy with a number of my colleagues for the next 30 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I come to the floor today, as I have over the last 2 years since the health care law was passed, with a doctor's second opinion. And I do that as someone who's practiced medicine, taking care of families across the country, and primarily in Wyoming for a quarter of a century, listening to them, trying to care for them, and knowing that what the American people want is care they need from a doctor that they want at a price they can afford. And during the last 2 years since the health care law has been passed, the American public has found out now that it was passed. They now get to know what's in it. And they don't like what they're seeing, because instead of providing patients with the care that they need from a doctor that they want at the cost they can afford, they are seeing time and time again a significant change and promises that the President has made broken. So I'm here with my colleagues today to talk about some of those concerns, and I see the Senator from Arizona on the floor, who has heard the promises made, and I know when he goes to town hall meetings and focuses to people back home, they find out that the costs that had been promised to go down have gone up instead, and that the opportunity of patients to keep the care that they want if they have it, or the doctor they want, they're not able to do that. And is that what the Senator from Arizona has been finding?
Yeah, I thank my colleague for his continued leadership on this issue and his eminent qualifications to address it and to help educate the American people about what's at stake here. And I think this colloquy that we're having has to be considered in the context of the arguments before the United States Supreme Court. My colleague from South Carolina, Senator Graham, I think will mention that we should not draw too many conclusions from the questions that are asked by the justices of the Supreme Court. But you know, one of the things that I find when I watch the talk shows, I'd ask the senator from Wyoming that always the first thing they say is the most important thing about Obamacare is that parents can keep their children on their health insurance plan until they reach age 26. Well, you know, I think all the four of us right now would be glad to put that into law as an amendment in a New York minute. If they want to stay till 30 in the basement, it's fine with me. But the fact is that for that to be the centerpiece, this is what why we have to preserve Obamacare, is of course a bad joke. What we're arguing about here is the thousands of pages. I guess Senator from Wyoming, is it 100,000 pages of regulations that have been already issued to try to implement this plan? But I'd also, before he responds to that, you know, we have promised to repeal and replace Obamacare, depending on not only the Supreme Court decision, but the will of the people as expressed perhaps next November. One of the areas that I think we have not focused enough attention on is two. one, the unsavory process that resulted in the passage of this legislation, the behind closed doors, everybody at the Blair House bludgeoning the AMA and the pharmaceuticals and all of those and the deals that were cut here. But another area was a promise made by the President that he would consider, but wasn't committed to, I'll admit, medical malpractice reform. And here we're talking about 20 to 30% of the health care costs in America, some, in the view of some, can be attributed to the unnecessary tests that are administered and prescribed by physicians and health care providers because of fear of ending up in court. And yet there's not, in all of this bill, there's not one mention that I know of that has meaningful approach to medical malpractice reform. And since the senator from South Carolina not only is an expert on the Supreme Court, but also to the trial lawyers, he's one of their Republican favorites, maybe he could address that aspect of medical care as well. Would the senator from Wyoming comment on that?
Well, I agree with my colleague from Arizona that there are a number of things that continue to drive up the cost of care, and one of the things that I believe should have been included in a health care law were things that we knew that actually could help lower the cost of care, lower unnecessary testing, and part of that, all of the studies show, is doing away with these junk lawsuits that result in significant numbers of additional tests, expensive tests being done. Seems to me often more time to help protect the doctor than actually to help the patient get well sooner. So I have lots of concerns, and even in a rural state like Wyoming, I see my colleague from South Dakota on the floor, as well as our colleague from South Carolina. This is a national concern, and I believe should have been included in any health care law that was really supposed to target lowering the cost. I mean, that's what the President promised in the beginning, that families would see their health care premiums go down by $2,500 per year, and instead the premiums have gone up by about $2,100 a year. And on so many of these things, and my colleague from South Carolina and I have actually co-sponsored legislation to try to give states opportunities to opt out of a number of provisions of the health care law because they are so onerous, add to the costs and add to what's happening in the states and for people at home. So you take a look at the President and his proposals, and I would think that any national health care law ought to look at certain components of things to actually bring down the cost of care. And in fact, what I see with the mandates in this one-size-fits-all approach and the demand that everyone in the country buys government-sponsored or government-approved health care insurance, that the rates are going up instead. So I would turn to my friend from South Carolina and ask him about that, plus the unfunded mandates that are forced on the states with Medicaid, which is a significant part of what's being discussed today in the Supreme Court.
I'll be glad to, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to create legislation that will allow states to opt out of Medicaid expansion under this bill. About 30% of the people in South Carolina will be eligible for Medicaid in 2014 if this bill is fully implemented. It is the second largest expense in the state of South Carolina is the South Carolina's matching fund requirement. You get $3 federal for every state dollar you put on the table to deal with Medicaid. Sounds like a good deal until Medicaid explodes in cost and becomes the #1 driver of the budget in South Carolina, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Arizona. And under this bill, the problem we have today with Medicaid becomes Medicaid on steroids. And I'm confident there are plenty of Democrats who have governors who are Democratic governors who will say, wait a minute, before you expand Medicaid and put additional burden on my state budget, let's see if we can find more creative ways of dealing with it and give people the ability to opt out of that. I think would be just good policy. But I just want to comment very quickly about that. One rule of thumb, any bill passed on Christmas Eve on a party line vote is probably no good for the country. That's exactly what happened in the United States Senate. As Senator McCain was saying, this is a party line vote, 60-40 on 1/5 or 1/6 of the economy. This was supposed to happen on C-SPAN. President Obama said, I'm coming to Washington and we're going to change the way Washington works. If I had to offer Exhibit A as to what's wrong with Washington, it would be the health care, Obamacare process as well as substance. Everything that people hated about Washington resulted in this bill being passed. Absolutely no bipartisanship, behind closed-door negotiations, beating people over the head to get their support, buying votes based on special interest deals for their state is not exactly what people had in mind. And is it any surprise that something that came out of that process is going over like a lead balloon? Now, one of the problems with health care is getting doctors to take Medicare and Medicaid patients. Well, what did we do with Medicare? We took $500 billion out of a system that's $30 trillion underfunded, $500 billion out of Medicare to help the uninsured. We've got an uninsured problem, but we've got a Medicare problem that's going to be an absolute nightmare. And what I wanted to do on malpractice is to tell a doctor, if you will take a Medicare or Medicaid patient doing the country a service and you get sued, we'll go to arbitration. Require arbitration, let the panel render their judgment, and if you want to go to court, you'll have a loser pay rule. To me, that's fair. I want people to have their chance to litigate differences when it comes to alleged medical malpractice, but I want doctors to feel like there's an incentive to serve Medicare and Medicaid patients. All I can say is that what was promised in this bill, the remedies to our health care system, none of them have come true, and what you see 2 years later are our worst fears being realized at a faster pace. We were promised, the President promised, if you like your health care, you'll be able to keep it. What's going on in the country is that employers are dropping health care for their employees because it's just cheaper to pay the fine. What's happening in this country is that the idea of being able to expand Medicaid without bankrupting the budgets of this country at the state level is just, when you look at the consequences, it's just a nightmare in the making. We were promised that this bill would reduce the deficit. Well, to me, health care includes doctors. And in the bill itself, we never dealt with the problem that doctors face of having their budgets, their reimbursements cut. That was not even addressed in Obamacare. That's a couple of $100 billion liability. So the idea that this thing has been paid for as promised, no longer exists. It is adding to the deficit. It was projected to be $900 billion in costs. Now it's about $1.7. So the basic promises around what this bill would do for our budget, what it would do for choices in health care, have not come true. And I'm here to say to our Democratic friends, fix this before it's too late. You will find people on our side willing to meet you in the middle when it comes to reforming health care because it needs to be reformed. But the model you have created, centralized health care, that's going to dam state budgets beyond belief, that's going to drive private sector insurance out of the market and is going to have a budget consequence on top of what we already have, is not the right model. So to my colleagues here today, I will work with you to do two things. Educate the public about what awaits us if we don't change this bill quickly, and work with our Democratic friends to find a better alternative. I think that's what America wants. When 67% of the people 2 years later feel like this is not the way to go, responsible leadership would say, let's alter course. The Supreme Court may strike down the mandate. They may say Medicaid expansion is a violation of the 10th Amendment. I hope they do, but I can say one thing with certainty. Because 9 judges, 5 of which say it's legal to do something, doesn't make it smart to do something. What's smart is to fix health care in a sustainable way. And what's smart is for Republicans and Democrats to work together in a transparent, open fashion. And we haven't done anything smart about health care yet. I hope that changes.
Could I just ask my colleagues if they remember the Cornhusker kickback? Another Democrat holdout took credit for $10 billion in new funding for community health centers, exemption for nonprofit insurance in their states. Vermont and Massachusetts were given additional Medicaid funding, $300 million increase for Medicaid in Louisiana. The list goes on and on of the process that they went through, culminating, as the senator from South Carolina mentioned, on Christmas Eve, a process that obviously most Americans find unsavory. And is it interesting, I would ask my two colleagues, if that these same people organizations, the AMA, the hospital, the pharmaceuticals, and others, who all signed up and were bludgeoned into supporting Obamacare. And by the way, that negotiating, as the President promised, that there would not be lobbyists in the White House. They were in the Blair House. That they would not play a major role, obviously. But the fact is, these same people, these same organizations, come to our office and ask for relief from Obamacare. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, time after time, the same members of the same organizations that supported Obamacare come and say, look, we can't live with this provision. We can't do it's impossible for us to comply with that provision. It's a fascinating commentary on trying to do the Lord's work in the city of Satan, I would ask my colleagues.
Well, I would say to my colleague from Arizona that he always has a way with words when it comes to describing the strange meanderings of the process here in Washington, but it really was. And, you know, unfortunately, all those groups that had access to the process, who then in the end, they all got sort of kowtowed into going along with it. Now they're all being hit with these huge tax bills because everybody's getting taxed to pay for this thing, all of which is passed on, I might add, to businesses in this country, driving up their costs. But the one thing that everybody has mentioned here this morning, which I think that didn't really have a seat at the table, were the states. I mean, think about the states and what this means for them. You're actually passing on, in the first 3 years, the federal government says it's going to pay 100% of the cost of the new populations that are going to be covered under Medicaid. But if you look at what happens after that, the states then are starting to have to share or bear more of the burden and be forced to pay at least another $118 billion, according to one congressional report, through the year 2023, which crowds out priorities like education, law enforcement, and all the things that we expect our states to do. And so the states got all these mandates shoved down their throats, making it more difficult for them to meet the responsibilities they have to the people in their individual states, because the federal government has not only said you're going to have to pay for this, but they've also become very prescriptive about what you can and can't do. And so states no longer are going to have, and frankly haven't had a lot of flexibility even in the past when it comes to setting eligibility standards, determining who can and can't be covered by Medicaid in their individual states. They just get the cost shoved down their throat, very little input into how they're going to implement this program, and so much so that governors all over the country are reacting to this, and that's why you've got 26 governors who are part of the litigation that's going on right now at the Supreme Court to challenge the mandate on Medicaid, which will be heard today by the court. But listen to what some of the governors around the country have said. And these are Democrat governors. This is the Democrat governor of Kentucky. I have no idea how to pay for these new mandates, regulations. Former governor of Tennessee said, I can't think of a worse time for this bill to be coming. Nobody's going to put their state into bankruptcy or their education system in the tank for it. The governor of Montana said, I'm going to have to double my patient load and run the risk of bankrupting Montana. Those are Democrat governors reacting to this new mandate that's being shoved down their throat because of the changes that were made to Medicaid in the health care bill. And so I think that the states, unfortunately, did not have a seat at the table. If they did, they certainly didn't get their voices heard, because they are going to be forced now, and the people, individuals in these states, to come up with the billions and billions and billions of additional dollars that they're going to have to pay to finance the new mandates in the legislation. Now, I want to make one other point, because, you know, there's been a lot said here on the floor of the Senate and by just people, I think, generally in Congress, about the importance of focusing like a laser on jobs in the economy. And frankly, I think that there are some things that actually have been done around here. Last week we finally passed a jobs bill, a private sector jobs bill, that would create jobs, hopefully make it easier for our small businesses to access capital to grow their businesses and create jobs. But the health care bill clearly is going to have the opposite effect. Now, interestingly enough, when it passed, there were lots of statements made at the time about how many jobs it was going to create. In fact, if you go back, the former Speaker of the House said that it would create 4 million jobs. 400,000 jobs almost immediately. That's former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Interestingly enough, that contradicts what the Congressional Budget Office director said. He testified that the new law would actually reduce employment over the next decade by 800,000 jobs. Now, there's an analysis done by UBS that stated that the law is, and I quote, arguably the biggest impediment to hiring, particularly hiring of less skilled workers. And so what we're seeing, again, is a promise made about creating jobs, and the very opposite, I think, is what you're going to see. Now, there was a Gallup poll just recently that found that 48% of small businesses in this country are not hiring because of the potential cost of health insurance under the health care law. 46% are not hiring because of concerns over other government regulations. But if you look at the impact that this legislation is having on hiring in America today, what we're hearing from the people who hire, the job creators out there in our small businesses, this is a huge impediment to hiring. The device manufacturer Stryker announced that they're shedding 5% of their workforce over concerns about the impending 2.3% medical device tax, which was included in the health care law. There is another employer here. This is somebody who owns restaurants in this company, a restaurant chain. Let me state bluntly, this is a direct quote, let me state bluntly, this law will cost my company more than we make, end quote. Cost the company more than we make. Another employer in this country said this, the new health care law has wrecked our plans to grow our business and create jobs. Madam President, that is exactly the thing that I think many of us predicted would happen. And notwithstanding the assertions that were made by the proponents of this legislation that it was going to create jobs, we see the very opposite happening. We see our small businesses are pulling back, not hiring, not growing their businesses because of the concerns about the cost and the penalties that will be imposed and the taxes that are included in the health care law. And so I know that my colleague from Wyoming represents a lot of small businesses like I do. South Dakota and Wyoming are not, they're very similar in terms of the size of the state, to tell you the way that people make their living. We've got a lot of small businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs, and we look to them to create jobs and grow the economies in our state. And obviously it becomes much more difficult when you continue to drive and shove these mandates, these requirements down the throats of our small businesses, these new taxes that they're going to have to bear. And the list of taxes under this is just really pretty amazing, the new taxes that are going to be imposed under this. But it adds up to, and this is just over the cost of the first decade, $552 billion. When it's fully implemented, $1 trillion in tax increases, all of which get passed on in the form of higher cost for health insurance and other costs throughout the economy. But my point very simply, Madam President, is if we are sincere in being focused on creating jobs in this country, perhaps the biggest impediment and barrier to that now is the health care law, the Obamacare law that is currently being heard by the Supreme Court. And I would just, I guess, ask my colleague from Wyoming to comment on his view with regard to some of these promises that were made regarding this legislation and how actually the bill is now playing out as we get to know more about it, which is what was the former Speaker of the House also said, we've got to get this bill passed so we can find out what's in it. Well, as the American people are finding out what's in it, they're becoming increasingly convinced that this was the wrong direction to go for the country, and I assume that's a view that's shared by a majority of the people in Wyoming.
Well, it is, and as a neighboring state, South Dakota and Wyoming, we work closely together, very similar. And the experiences we're having in Wyoming, where we now have a Republican governor, previously had a Democrat governor, and you talked about the Medicaid mandates, what's been called by one governor with the mother of all unfunded mandates. The money that then has to be used for that is, as you said, crowding out other things. Then that's money that can't be used specifically for education. One of the worst things that's happening for education across our country is the health care law. Because for every penny that the state now has to add to pay for this Medicaid expansion, this unfunded mandate, and when I heard the numbers from my colleague from South Dakota, these are astronomically large numbers. Those are dollars that aren't going to go to the universities and the institutions of higher education, as well as our additional schools throughout the state. So when all of a sudden, if you have a student in college and you see that the tuition has gone up much more than you thought it should have, or you likely think it shouldn't go up at all, say, why is it? Well, it's President Obama's health care law. That is what's mandating money being spent for the Medicaid and the unfunded mandates, so that takes the dollars away from education. Just this month, in March 2012, there is a report out, the 2011 actuarial report on the financial outlook for Medicaid. And the figures are astonishing. How this health spending law, called Obamacare or the so-called Affordable Care Act, but because you call it that doesn't mean it is affordable, as we see from this report. It drives up federal Medicaid costs by, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars through 2020. It forces many more people onto the Medicaid rolls. And, the President has talked so much and used interchangeably the words coverage and care. But what we know is across the country, if somebody has a Medicaid card, that does not equate to necessarily being able to receive care. As my colleague from South Dakota talked about reimbursement rates for physicians, when we see how Medicaid in many ways underpays sometimes even the cost of seeing the patient, it is harder for those patients to get seen. So I think the President has used two words interchangeably which are in no way interchangeable. Someone can have a Medicaid card but not be able to get care. And the concern is now with Medicare, as my colleague from South Dakota said, $500 billion of Medicare taken out of Medicare, not to strengthen Medicare, not to increase the security for people on Medicare, not to help improve Medicare, but to start a whole new government program for other people. The Medicare patients are having a harder and harder time finding a physician to care for them. So I would say the President of the United States, by using those two words interchangeably, coverage and care, has unfortunately misled people to think that coverage equals care, and we know it does not. And that is the concern, was one of the concerns with the health care law as we talk about the broken promises and the unfunded mandates sent to the state. So as I stand here with my colleague from South Dakota, I assume that when you go home on weekends, and you do almost every weekend, you hear the same things that I hear. And when I have a town hall meeting and I ask the question, how many of you believe that under the health care law, remember the one that the President promised, your rates would go down, your insurance rates would go down $2,500 a year. How many of you believe that actually because of the law your rates are going up faster if there hadn't been a law at all? And all the hands go up. The hands go up. And they say, how many of you believe that the quality and availability of your care is going to get worse because of this law? And again, the hands go up. And, for a second I thought maybe that was just something we saw in Wyoming and in South Dakota. But in a national poll yesterday, national poll in the New York Times of all places, page A15, yesterday's New York Times, in terms of the health care law. How many people will this health law affect you personally? Will this help you? Less than 1 in 5 Americans said this will help me. Twice as many said it will actually hurt them. When they asked, will this decrease your costs? 1 in 6 said it would decrease their cost. More than half said it would increase their cost. When it asked, how about the quality of your care? Only 1 in 6 said that they actually expected better quality of care. Many, many more expect worse quality of care. So it's not just Wyoming, it's not just South Dakota, it's the entire country which is seeing this same impact. And I would ask my colleague from South Dakota, as he travels around, is this what you're seeing everywhere as well?
Well, it certainly is, and I think that as you mentioned, the huge majority of businesses across this country, and especially small businesses like those that you and I represent in Wyoming and South Dakota, are enormously concerned about what this is going to do to their ability to create jobs, to maintain coverage for their employees. And there are just so many huge impacts from this, much of which, frankly, we predicted. But again, the idea, the notion that somehow imposing over $500 billion in new taxes on businesses in this country on health insurance plans was somehow going to lead to lower costs for people to get coverage in this country is beyond me. I don't know how I'm at a loss as to explain how anybody could make the argument that this was going to create jobs. And of course, as I said, former Speaker Pelosi predicted 4 million new jobs The Congressional Budget Office had said that it would cost us 800,000 jobs. I suspect that's a conservative estimate based upon what I hear from employers in my state and elsewhere around the country. But I do want to point out, too, that, you know, in so many ways, this thing, because of the new mandates, because of the new taxes, because of the new costs, is just going to make everybody's lives more complicated, more difficult, including our states. And we represent states where our governors, our legislators work really hard to balance our budgets, to live within their means, not to spend money that they don't have. And yet here they are being forced by the federal government to swallow these additional costs that are coming because of this new health care plan. Basically what the Obama administration has done is it's put shackles on the states when it comes to making decisions about the eligibility needs in their states. They're going to have to lower spending on Medicaid providers, and in some cases our states are trying innovative approaches to care delivery. They're trying to come up with new ways of doing this and to do it more effectively, and yet the federal government is going to make that much, much more difficult. So bottom line is that the combined effect of the health care, the Obamacare's policies, has taken power from the states, given more of it to Washington. It's forced unrealistic new spending mandates on the states that are going to crowd out those local priorities that the senator from Wyoming mentioned, like education, like law enforcement, the things that I think constituents in our individual states expect their governors and their state legislatures to deal with. And so, again, I would come back to what these governors have said, and I'm not talking about the conservative Republican governors in this country. I mean, look at what the Democrat governors have said. Governor of Kentucky, I have no idea how to pay for this. The governor, as I said, of Montana, basically saying that increasing the patient load under this bill will cause a bankruptcy or force him to bankrupt his state. And then, of course, there's even the governor of a state like California,
Republican time has expired,
which I'll submit for the record. But, Madam President, I think the point is there are lots of promises made that haven't been kept with this legislation. I yield the floor.
Senator from New Jersey.
Madam President, I come to the floor to talk about what is the pending business before the floor, which is my legislation to end big oil subsidies in this country. You know, Madam President, middle-class families are hurting, struggling to make ends meet, and yet today we're here on the floor of the United States Senate fighting an uphill battle against those on the other side of the aisle who with one hand would continue handing out $24 billion in wasteful subsidies to 5 of the biggest, most profitable oil companies in the country, and with the other hand take away vital programs from our nation's veterans, its seniors, disabled children, just to name a few. We hear our Republican friends talk about balanced budgets, and we hear them talk about austerity. We hear them saying we all have to tighten our belts. We all have to make hard choices on Medicare and veterans benefits and student loans, just to name a few. And yet, they will not, in that austerity or shared sacrifice, say that we will end unnecessary tax breaks to big oil. They'll continue to ask the same thing they've asked 1,000 times before, which is that the American taxpayers subsidize the richest 5 companies in the world while we cut programs for our wounded soldiers, for our seniors, and for our students. We think of budgets, some people think of budgets just as boring documents with lots of bewildering numbers. In reality, they are statements about our priorities. And this debate today draws the brightest of lines between our priorities and theirs. The Romney-Ryan budget, for example, cuts $2.2 billion in education for children with disabilities. And what do they say to these parents? I guess they justify it by saying we just can't afford it.
So why is it that we cannot afford it when 5 companies that collectively made $137 billion in profits just last year alone are getting $24 billion in subsidies over the next 10 years? So you tell these children on the Romney-Ryan budget they cannot be helped to fulfill their God-given potential because we just can't afford it, but we can afford to give these 5 companies who made $137 billion in profits, not proceeds, profits, that we should give them an additional $24 billion of our taxpayers' money? I don't think so, Madam President. Here's another example. Republicans are proposing cutting $13 billion per year from the SNAP program. That's formerly called the food stamp program, for families who do not know where their next meal will come from. So laid-off workers may not be able to feed their families, but our Republican colleagues will ensure that big oil companies continue to stuff their face at the taxpayer trough. And they make sure no subsidies are cut that will hurt the bonuses of the big 5 oil company CEOs. Here's one of them, Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil. He made nearly $29 million in just 2010. How is it that we can afford to protect Mr. Tillerson's pay, but not a program designed to help hungry children? Why is it that we need to protect those who need it the least, but take it from those who need it the most? Another issue we keep hearing from the other side is that cutting these subsidies will somehow raise gas prices. The notion that gas prices will go up, I mean, this is only in Washington. Only in Washington. Any place else in this country, I'll tell you, they get it. But only in Washington, hearing from the other side that cutting subsidies will somehow raise gas prices. The notion that gas prices will go up if we end subsidies to big oil is nothing more than Republican snake oil, and the American people aren't buying it. Let me put it plainly. By subsidizing, we are subsidizing these companies to the tune of over $2 billion per year. Collectively, just these 5 companies, not talking about other size producers, just these 5 companies, they made $137 billion last year. Can anybody here with a straight face tell the American people that if they could only live with $135 billion in profits, that they would give up their $2 billion and therefore, if they could only live with $135 billion, they wouldn't need to raise gas prices a dime, unless they are so greedy that $135 billion is not enough in profits, that they need out of each and every taxpayer's pocket in this country another $2 billion to add to their profits. Now, yesterday morning I heard one of my colleagues on the floor ask, why are we picking on the poor oil companies when everyone gets the same tax deductions? So, Madam President, I took out my 1040 tax form to look for myself, and I was looking, I said, let's see, intangible drilling costs. Nope, I don't see it in my 1040 form. Tertiary injectants. I don't see it on my 1040 form. So I guess not everyone gets the special tax deductions for drilling. Now, there is a tax deduction that big oil gets called domestic manufacturing deduction. When Congress was contemplating that provision, big oil, through their legion of lobbyists, managed to convince many on the other side of the aisle that drilling for oil was somehow manufacturing. You know, when we think of manufacturing, we think about creating a product. Creating a product. I don't know about you, but being able to call drilling for oil manufacturing seems like a real special tax break to me. So, Madam President, as I said yesterday in this chamber, it's time to get back to reality. The type of reality that middle-class families face in this country, the type of reality that middle-class families face as they go to the pump, as they have to get to work, take their children to school, to doctor's appointments, type of reality small businesses face when they're trying to send their sales force across a state and have them traveling in a car to do so. It's time to tell middle-class families struggling to make ends meet that fairness means everyone pays their fair share when it comes to reducing the deficit. And that it also means it's time to stop wasting taxpayer monies on oil subsidies and use this money to invest in clean energy, in jobs, in lowering the deficit. It's time for us to repeal the big oil tax breaks. It's time, Madam President, for our colleagues on the other side to join us to end this corporate welfare for big oil companies, to create competition to help lower gas prices and to reduce the deficit rather than continue to sell snake oil to the American people to protect big oil profits. I have listened to some of the debate. I just don't get it. I've seen average Americans who are struggling, and they say, oh, wait a minute, $24 billion of our money is going to the big five oil companies, and they're making $137 billion. As a matter of fact, that's just 1 year. The $24 billion that we want to eliminate and put into renewable energy fuels that will create the competition that will ultimately help drive down gas prices, to reduce the deficit significantly instead of calling upon cuts to children, whether in their nutrition or cuts to children who are disabled. You know, during that same period of time, I only talked about $137 billion in 1 year. We want to cut $24 billion over the course of 10 years. Guess what they'll make in 10 years? Over $1 trillion in profits. I find it hard to fall for the crocodile tears that taking $24 billion over 10 years, a little over $2 billion a year, when they're going to make $1 trillion over a decade, is somehow not enough, that leaves them with not enough profits, $24 billion from $1 trillion, and that because we take those $24 billion, gas prices are going to go up. Well, all of these subsidies haven't made gas prices go down. And as a matter of fact, as I pointed out yesterday, at a time that they were making $137 billion in profits, they were producing 4% less oil. So come on. It's time to give working families in this country a break. We can do that as we vote to end big oil subsidies. With that, Madam President, I yield the floor and observe the absence of a quorum.
Mr. Kaka.